Are you a business owner looking for real advice and input? You're in the right place. From concept to launch to growth, funding, and beyond. Welcome to Startup Hustle with your hosts. One once sold a business for $150 million. The other, the author of $1 Million Bedroom. Here are your hosts of Startup Hustle, Matt DeCoursey and Matt Watson.
1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. 'Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it.
And we're back. Another episode of Startup Hustle. Matt DeCoursey here with Lesa Mitchell, who'll be sitting in for Matt Watson today. Hi, Lesa.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. Are you nervous about these big shoes that you have to fill sitting in for Watson?
I'm super nervous. I know him. I'm very nervous.
I doubt that. Now, before I introduce Lesa and tell everyone out there what exactly she does and all the great stuff we're going to talk about today, I do need to let you know that today's episode of Startup Hustle is brought to you by Fullscale.io, helping you build a software development team quickly and affordably. Now, with me today is Lesa Mitchell. Lesa is the managing director of Techstars. She's located here in Kansas City, but has been all around. Techstars is an amazing, amazing, amazing organization, and also the subject of today's episode of Startup Hustle. So, Lesa, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
I think that we should maybe start with what is Techstars?
So Techstars is a company, and the piece of Techstars that I am involved with is the accelerator. And we're a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed kind of broadly. We have a number of different arms, including Startup Weekend, Techstars Network, Techstars Studio, etc. But broadly speaking, relative to Techstars, we consider us a worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. And I run the accelerator in Kansas City.
Okay. So, business accelerators, any programs that help entrepreneurs, anything early stage, and especially funding parts are highly popular topics here on Startup Hustle. As far as Techstars go, I have compared Techstars here on the podcast to kind of like being selected to be on American Idol. Meaning like it doesn't mean you necessarily won yet, but you got the ticket to go to, you got the golden ticket maybe, and I don't mean that in every sense of the word, but you get a chance to get up on the stage in front of a little bigger audience and talk more about what you do. Now, from a business accelerator standpoint, what kind of companies does Techstars typically seek, or what are some of the past What's some of the past stuff that you and the accelerator have done in the past?
Yeah, so Techstars has two different kinds of accelerator programs. A small portion of Techstars are accelerator programs funded by Techstars, and a much bigger portion of Techstars accelerators are programs that are funded by corporations. In some cases, it's a network of corporations. In some cases, it's a single corporation. The program that I have in Kansas City is the last program that was launched that is fully funded by Techstars, meaning I don't have to run around and raise money for my companies. I am fully funded by Techstars. And what that also means is that I get to pick essentially any companies I want. If I was running a corporate program, I would be like I did last year in Indianapolis. I would be looking for companies that were very specific to solving problems for that corporation. Since I'm running a program that I can decide on my own what I want, essentially I look for founders that I want to spend the next 5 to 10 years with. Is a really big thing. People think that Techstars is a 3-month accelerator, and that's totally a misnomer. And so if I don't love them, it's going to be sad for me long term, because I am the one that will be, I still a 2018 Techstars company, and I meet every Tuesday morning at 7:30 in the morning, and he lives in the Netherlands. And that's not that unusual. And so I'm looking for founders that I like, and I'm looking for businesses that I think that I can help. I know that frankly, saying that string of words isn't very helpful to entrepreneurs because they hear that and say, what the hell does that mean? And the answer is to probably look at companies that I have funded before and have been involved with before. I love GovTech stuff. I like EdTech. Probably one of the companies doing best in COVID right now is a company that went through Techstars 2018 called EdSites in New York that I think has closed more customers in the last 2 months than they had in the previous year. I love marketplaces. WhatBuy was a marketplace that I funded in 2018. I mean, I like companies that are solving a real problem. I'm not so excited about things that are marketing-ish, or things that just like really aren't solving a real problem in society.
So, you mentioned, you said you even called yourself out on making what could have been interpreted as an overly broad statement. I personally found it to be highly specific. You said, we like to be involved with companies that we can help.
Yeah.
Now, I think that says everything, because we've spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about all different types of investment forms and capital and structures and you name it.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that we've been repetitive across on almost all of them is try to work with people that can, quote, help you. So what does help mean? I mean, help is more than just writing a check. And there's been a lot of terms for that, smart money, blah, 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 whatever you want to call it. But now I'm the same way. So via Full Scale, Matt Watson and I have made $800,000 worth of resource investments in the last year. And the one requirement that we start with is, can we, quote, help this company? Meaning, like, do we know anything about what they do? Do we have someone in that theoretical Rolodex that we can call any type of stuff? And therefore a lot of the investments that we've made have been related to things that we have to understand it. And I've actually had opportunities and talked to companies, and I've been like, you know what? I think you're going to do great, but it's not going to be with me as your investor because I can't bring you any value.
Yep.
And other than the check or the resources. So, I mean, I think that that's a really, really important part. So, and in Congress with that, when you talk about, quote, helping a company, what are a few of the things that a well-aligned accelerator or investor will, quote, be able to help with?
Yeah. So there's a number of things that relative to Techstars that are consistent across programs. And kind of doesn't matter what the company is, no matter what, they will come out and they will have a killer financial model. If they don't have a killer financial model tied to assumptions that can't be played by investors, they did not come from Techstars. We have a killer way of teaching workshops tied to building sales funnels. And we have someone that's written a book on that topic that we bring into every single program. So there are super common elements that go across every Techstars program. Where it becomes different is A, the expertise of the MD, and B, the network. And so I can lean on people across the Techstars network, or I can lean on my own personal network, which I do a lot. I mean, this morning, funny enough, I sent an email to James Courier, who runs NFX. And I said, James, I just finished screening for my companies, and I think I'm going to select a boatload of marketplaces. And if I do, I am hoping that I can count on you to be one of my mentors in the program. And so for me, when I'm selecting companies, I'm also thinking about my network. And if I can't bring people to the table that are way smarter about something than I am, even if I get it, I want the best of the best to come to the table. Lisa Gansky, my former business partner, wrote a book on marketplaces. For sure, she will be a mentor for me. She always is. And so from what is different, I mean, when we talk about Techstars as the network that will help entrepreneurs succeed. We mean that both locally as well as globally. We mean it short term and we mean it long term.
So if you're listening and you're interested in learning more about Techstars, it's pretty easy. You go to techstars.com.
Yeah.
It's just like it sounds. I'm sitting here, I'm looking, I'm like, whoa, we're 9 minutes into this, and I have not mentioned that part. There's a link in the show notes. Check it out. I think those are all great points. Especially when it comes to, okay, so I think a lot of people in early stages of business don't understand how hard it is to generate that first dollar. In my book, $1 Million Bedroom, it's one of the very first things I talk about when it comes to building a business. Like, understand your path to revenue, because and I know you've heard it a million times. You get someone, they're showing you their way too long deck, and they're saying, if we can just get 10% of market share, and you're like, how about we get $1? Let's get $1 first, and they're like, well, that's not going to be a big deal. And I think the thing that, so I am an internal optimist, but when it comes to startups and business, I am a jaded pessimist in many categories, because your ability to generate revenue, partnerships, credibility, all that stuff in the beginning are probably way, way, way worse than what you like to think it is. And with the right kind of guidance, and being someone that has been a salesperson my whole life, I still consider myself a salesperson. Anything that you can do if people can accelerate you forward in that process, and get you in front of a couple people, even if you don't get their business right away, you're going to remain on their radar for later, and you might get some really, really insightful information about exactly what you're lacking or what you haven't considered that true influential decision makers can give. And I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Including, a CEO is the number one salesperson for a company. And if a CEO can't sell, forget it. We might as well just not even start the conversation. Even
True.
If it's a tech person, they better learn to sell, or forget it. You can't hire your first sales guy, and it has to be you. But the other piece of it, and I think one of the values that we bring to the table with our Techstars companies, is I say to them frequently, my job is to keep you from doing horrible things in the first couple years of your company that you're not going to know are horrible until about year 3 or 4, and you can't survive from. And
please expand. What are some of those top ones? I want to hear it.
Usually it's either legal contracts, it's strategic partnerships, channel partners that you decide upon. I remember so clearly a funny story with one of my companies that I won't give specifics, but I'll give generalities, who had been coached about, here's how he needs to bring home his first couple of channel partners. He started out wanting to do a marketplace, but then it became obvious that channel partners was going to be a hell of a lot easier. And he got his first contract and talked to one of the Techstars mentors, who is a former Techstars CEO in Kansas City, who just moved away recently. He called me up about 6 hours later, and he said, oh my God, Adam Blake just kept me from making the biggest mistake of my entire life. He said, I was going to sign this deal because it looked fantastic. And he asked me these 3 questions because Adam was a lead mentor for him. And he said, this just changed my life. And if I would have done this, it would have killed my company. And so it's super important to, it's including things like hiring. It's including things like, the stack that you're going to build on and your architecture, things like that, sound super simple, or I can flip from this to that kill companies, and people don't understand it. Your cap table, who you decide to take investments from. And again, strategic partners and people who decide they're going to take, a venture investment from a corporate venture group, and frankly, no other corporate that's going to be a customer for them is ever going to fund or ever going to be a customer again, because they just, laid themselves bare. And so there's a lot of things that founders just don't think about if they've never done it before. And sometimes even if they have done it before, if it's a different kind of company, they can blindly run down the street and find out 3 years later that they screwed something up they can't recover from.
So, Lisa had meant, for those of you listening, Lisa just mentioned it as I'm about to, channel partnerships. And channel partnerships are when you're able to plug yourself into someone else's sales channels. Having absolutely no reference here that makes sense. Well, I'll make something up. This is fictional. But as the founder of GigaBook, a booking platform, if I were to say, take Flywheel, who is up in Omaha, and they host WordPress sites. Now, this is once again fictional, but if they were to contact me, or we contacted them, and we created a very simple or easy, you see a lot of one click integrations or something like that. We made it very easy for them to offer what we had through their existing sales channel or anything like that, and we would have some, I don't know, you figure all these deals are different. Yep. Right. But with that, and once again, that was fictional. So that's not a thing. I was just trying to come up with an example and do it as quickly as I could. So in this same regard, though, channel partnerships, and Watson's talked about this a lot too, they can be wolves in sheep's clothing in a heartbeat because, they often suck up. You're rarely, if ever, immediately ready to be inserted into the channel. Which means that you have to take your own bandwidth, focus, understanding all of that, and you have to dedicate it now to getting in the channel. Now, here's the thing: is the channel, and I mentioned wolves in sheep's clothing. They look like this giant, like just amazing pile of cash or whatever, but they often aren't. And the thing is you're in these channel partnerships sometimes with an unlimited bunch of other partners or different stuff. You're just really unsure of that. I went through a situation with that where I even did a bunch of development up front and did a whole bunch of stuff. This is several years ago. I learned a very painful lesson. Because it stalled the growth of my other stuff. And then you mentioned it too, is like, the channel partners aren't just letting you in there because they think you're cool. They want a portion of your revenue and a bunch of different stuff. And if you've listened to the show regularly, you've heard me say, don't sacrifice the long-term on the altar of the immediate. And that means that you can make deals and that proverbial deal with the devil or something. Now, on the flip side, though, channel partners done well can give you not only a level of street cred, but usership, information, data. Sometimes they're even strategically created. You say, well, I don't have the money to do this. And you can even, sometimes they're worked out where you may actually pre-sell licenses, do a lot of different things. Channel partners done correctly are done well. Now, that said, if you're a newbie and you haven't done this stuff before, you don't know what a good deal is. You don't know the pitfalls to look out for. You are literally David versus Goliath. Now, in the story of David versus Goliath, the giant was taken down. The thing is the other 9,999 times that story was told, he got crushed underfoot. And realistically, that's the kind of battle you're stepping into. Some people are equipped for it, some people aren't. So, now in regards to sales channels, did I miss anything there? Because I think that was fairly complete.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you think that channel partners are a place for you, you need to figure out, okay, who are 20 potential partners that I can have, not two. And what is the pros and cons column both ways for like 3 or 4 of them before you ever even start going down this road. Because you want to make sure that you're not unfortunately, a lot of times what we see is that people get into a channel partnership because somebody will come to an early stage founder and say, oh, I have this huge market in Canada and I want to be a co-seller of yours in Canada because you're not in Canada, you're in whatever, St. Louis. And I can totally do that. And then when you read the agreement says, oh, and also we already have these 10 global customers that you can never talk to if we're going to be a channel partner of yours. And guess what? 6 months later, one of those giant companies is going to call you and say, we really need what you have to offer. And you're not going to be able to play.
You can't do it. Yep.
You're going to call me and you're going to say, is there a way out of this? And I'm going to say, let me look at the contracts. And I'm going to look at the contract and say, yes, there is in 12 months.
Now, I want to highlight another thing that Lesa said. She said, "Go find 20, not 2." Now, this is someone who also a few minutes earlier has admitted a love for marketplaces. Now, marketplaces are driven by simple supply and demand, equilibrium, and it's the one thing that you okay. I don't timestamp issues a lot, but if you've been listening recently, I have. Today's April 20th, and oil was negative $40 a barrel, meaning like you could literally get paid to take oil right now because there's nowhere to put it. That is a direct effect of supply and demand equilibrium. And the one thing, it doesn't matter what you've got or who you are or any of it. If there's you cannot outclass the power of supply and demand. Now, within marketplaces, you also can't have an auction, and you can't have an auction with one bidder. So get out there and talk to a shitload of people. Like the smartest people I know that have exited companies, well, they get a few interested parties going in. You will be a lot of the people that write checks suffer greatly from FOMO, fear of missing out, and join in on these things. So if you ever hear Watson talk about exiting Vin Solutions, they got a whole lot of people bedded in there, and they will joke. They will say that every day they would answer the phone going, every day, because every day the bid for the company got higher. Yep. And that's a marketplace effect, whether you're dealing with marketplaces or not. But one of the things too you mentioned is that these exclusionary things. And the thing is you can enter some of these partner agreements, you realize they're not anything near what you thought they were going to be, and then and decide if you want to retract from. You mentioned the term 12 months or something like that. I mean, what's happening? And I'm living in today right now, so that can be challenging. Another thing too that you brought up, so at Full Scale, I talk to tech companies all day, every day, like either as existing clients or prospects, and that tech stack decision. And I get a lot of people, they come and they've got some strange, obscure platform. And I'll ask them, I'll say, why did you ever decide to use this? Like, I mean, I'm just asking, like, and they'll say, well, my neighbor John was blah, 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 blah. And he felt passionately that we use Haskell coupled with something else. I'm like, did John ever tell you that you would have a nearly impossible time finding people to work on it?
Yeah, that's exactly.
And it would be like, it would be like me showing up in China and not speaking Chinese, like from a integration and comparability standpoint, and just like, and I see that a lot. And, and there are some things, and I don't know if that's what you were directly referring to. And then there's some other things that just aren't really made for certain things on an enterprise level. So it's about like, who can you find to work at it? And like there's certain tech stacks, like, well, Ruby on Rails is an interesting one because a lot of people have decided to switch to that, but there's already a shortage of talented senior developers worldwide. And platforms like that, there aren't even enough of them. So like when customers call me and they're like, yeah, I got a Ruby on Rails platform, I cringe a little bit. And it's just because we at Full Scale employs quite a bit of Ruby on Rails developers, but I'm only one phone call away from placing them with the clients I already have if I get a new one. So, certain things is that forward thinking and that scalability. If you can't find people that are experts to work on it, that's a problem. Is that the similar stuff that you run into, or is it different?
No, it's very similar. I mean, same thing. And I think the same thing applies to hardware. I mean, one of the competitive advantages
True.
At Techstars is we probably invested in more hardware companies than anybody on the planet. And
hardware is hard.
And hardware is hard.
It is very hard. Yeah.
At Techstars, we have a back end called Techstars Connect that only founders have access to. And it's our kind of internal Reddit that is used by 2,000 plus founders around the world. And I remember when having a conversation with Adam Blake when he was starting Zego, one of the things that he wanted to know is, give me an understanding of the hardware companies, CEOs that I'm going to be able to reach out, because the company that he started is not the company that he ended up with. And frankly, it's because put him in touch with Paul at Spiro and a number of other people who have been doing hardware for a long time, and had a lot of early conversations with Adam about the road that he was going to go down. And he switched the road he was going down because it would have been too hard. And so our goal is to make sure that if companies are going to go down a specific road, let's find 10 or 15 other people that have gone down that road. We've invested in over 2,000 companies now, so it's not that hard. And let's make sure that they talk to each other and find out if there's something stupid that they're missing out.
You know, and I'm going to lead that into the next thing. So one of the founders of Techstars, Brad Feld, wrote the book on venture deals. And I know because I have a copy of it. I just read the most recent version of it. Well, I own the book and I have it on Audible. And, you know, we often refer to Startup Hustle as a podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. That is a book about funding by founders for founders.
Yep.
And it's not written by attorneys. It's written by people that have done it.
Yep.
And I love it. I love it because it's like, hey, look, this is really how it is, you know, in certain things. And like, this is why you want to avoid stuff. So I got to feel that at Techstars, you do a brilliant job, or at least like come from a remarkably well-informed point of view when it comes to, you know, so here's the thing is you go to apply to a business accelerator, and there's a lot of companies that have collected these Boy and Girl Scout badges along the way. Hey, I got into Techstars. Hey, I got into this. I did this. I did this. I did that. Well, those are all things that I look at startups sometimes like a video game, and you're your own avatar, and you get the Techstars badge, you get these other badges, you're on Startup Hustle, whatever. You have all these things that lend to your credibility, but you're doing so because you want to bring in an insane amount of money to make your dreams come true. But the problem is if you've never done that, or you're not well versed in it, you immediately realize this is what will go through your head. Oh shit, I am not prepared for right now. And I think that when it comes to a lot, especially Techstars and the reputation of the people I know that have gone through it, that's something that your organization really brings a lot of value around. Like, what are your comments on that? Because I think I'm right on. Like, first off, raising money sucks. Oh. And then if you get to the point where you can do it, you're like, oh my God, what are you talking about? What are these different kinds of shares? By the way, venture deals, Brad Feld.
Yeah.
Like, and by the way, I consider myself very well versed in the subject, and I got about 18 minutes into the Audible, and I'm like, dude, I was like hitting rewind like 5 times because I'd never heard of half the stuff, but all very, very important info.
Yeah, and realize I think this was version either 3 or 4 of venture deals.
Actually, I think it's like 6.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah,
redo it often because the world changes and things change. I have to tell you, I have a crazy experience recently, and it depends upon what your community, as weird as this sounds, it depends upon community norms. There's a city in the US that is a larger city than Kansas City, significantly, that just has so few venture investors there that the norms are insane. And I was interviewing a founder. I'm interviewing a whole bunch of founders, some of which will end up in my program, from that city. And this founder called me back and he said, hey, you know, I'm trying to raise this priced round for $250K. And he kept talking. But that's of course all I heard because I'd already met him. And I'm like, what? Wait, what are you doing? And I said, why are you raising a priced round? Why are you just not doing a convertible note for $250K? And he was like, well, no one in my city has ever done a convertible note. None of the angel investors. And this is for real. This is for real. When I can tell this story after my program is announced in June, I'll tell the rest of the story because it's a big city. And it was validated by like 10 other people, and a ton of Techstars people are in the city who I've talked to who have all said to me, yep, this is for real. And so, part of the problem for entrepreneurs is they're wading through. So I read Brad's book, but then I go and talk to people who like were the former managing director of XYZ venture capital company 10 years ago. And they're significantly retired, and they tell me, no, you can't, only priced rounds. Nobody does convertible notes. And so I understand why entrepreneurs are confused.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. And I don't even have enough time to kind of get into my story about some of that, but having that feeling myself of like, oh shit, I'm like way in over my head. And I usually make sure I try to do everything I can to enter any situation with that not being the case. But the stuff we're talking about is okay. You may know what a convertible note is, but there's myriad ways that they can be utilized. There's a whole bunch of different structure and just stuff that comes up and can affect it, and the status of the status and type of shares, and like what happens if it doesn't convert, and like all this different stuff. And while in the beginning most of these things were created to perform the well-needed balance between not understanding what some things were worth now compared to later, but also protecting downside for investors who may have, like, because if you buy a priced round, you bought a piece of a company for a price.
Yeah.
Now here's the thing is there's a winner and a loser on the side of that. And you won't know, like, you don't know people. I've had so many people that they're like, well, is this a fair valuation? I'm like, ask me in 5 years, because you'll know, because you too will know.
Yeah,
but
exactly right. And I'm not saying I love convertible notes and that's the answer to all things. I'm saying if you're a baby company and you're super, super early and there's no way to create a real legit valuation and you're raising less than $750,000, I would say you should do a convertible note. Once it gets beyond that, no, don't do a convertible note. Your dilution will be horrible. You want to get to a price round by then, but darn it, I want you to have customers and be able to have a decent price on that round, because you will live with that now for a while. So again, just details that seem like they could be insignificant that could kill you later.
So, well, thank you for that. And I mean, we would have to have multiple episodes to legitimately go through and recognize, define, and I wouldn't even touch advising, because I'm not an attorney. I don't think you are you?
No.
Yeah. So so literally can't advise you on what path to take. I mean, really in the end, on so many levels, a lot of it, as bad as the answers may sound when I give them to people, they're like, well, is this fair? I'm like, do you feel it's fair? Does it feel right? Like, does this seem like a fair price? Are you excited about it? And some people say no one leaves a negotiation with a smile, but at the same time, like, I think one of the things that sometimes people don't understand when it comes to investors is until which point they partner with you, it's their job to get the best deal possible out of you. And, so you have to kind of, I mentioned being a bit of, jaded and somewhat pessimistic when it comes to certain things. I mean, reality is from my own experience in the last decade, I see 9 out of 10 attempts at funding fall through. Just meaning and that's not directly related to Techstars. That's just the way it goes, because there's a whole lot of obstacles between you and the deposit. And I think that, another thing too, that people need to consider is I see so many people wait too long. They're like, yeah, I'm out of money in a month, but I'm going to raise capital. I'm like, when? And from the grave, or somewhere else. And, the businesses are usually, there's so many businesses that are affected by COVID-19 right now. The ones with high levels of survivorship are the ones that have adequate capital on hand and didn't wait till they were at the end of their runway. So, Anyway. All right. So once again, with us today, Managing Director of Techstars, Lesa Mitchell. Go to techstars.com and maybe drop in an application to join their program. You have a whole lot of them. Now, you mentioned something earlier about wanting to work with people. That's been a big thing for us here, both from the companies we work with from Full Scale. Like, we actually tell clients no fairly regularly. And while I might not dress it up as, I just don't know if I want to work with you, sometimes that is the case. And I mentioned in $1 Million Bedroom that when you sell people part of your company or you join up with people, it's actually easier afterward to get rid of your spouse than it is to get rid of your partners or investors. Now, based on that, I personally like to do business with people that I like, people that inspire me, people that aren't negative about all things. This is an important part, especially in early stages, because you might have a great idea, but if no one believes in you, not happening. What are some of the things that really check boxes for you when you are looking for founders, and give me a little bit and how important they are, or are some of them maybe like, I prefer this, but it's not required?
Well, I mean, again, this is a really hard topic because it is so, it's not unusual for different Techstars MDs like myself to be looking at the same company. And we will say to each other and to the founder, you need to figure out, like, if it's a city program, and so then it's not tied to a corporation. I mean, I tell companies, just as an example, if you were a material science company or you are a hard tech company and you applied to me and you applied to the Heritage Group program that I ran last year, if you are one of those kinds of companies, that should be your choice, because those guys will be your first customers. I will not personally be your first customer. But when it comes to programs like LA, New York, Kansas City, we sometimes look at the same founders and we will talk about it amongst ourselves, why it works better for me than somebody else. And it's usually very personal. It's a bunch of the companies that just went through screening with me, I've been talking to since January. And I've talked to on multiple occasions. They call me when they have a problem. I am looking for whether or not they are mentorable. I am definitely looking for whether I can give them really hard feedback. And frankly, I sometimes try to almost be mean in terms of really pushing, like, I hate the name of your company. I did say that to one of the founders. I hate the name of your company. And it's up to you. It's your company, but you're going to end up renaming it. You need to know that. So how attached are you to this? Or same thing on tech stack, or same thing on, sometimes it's co-founders that I'm just not seeing it. I'm not seeing how it's going to work. I'm not seeing why in the world do you have a co-founder that's a COO and neither one of you are engineers? I mean, I'm out. And so usually it's very kind of personal things like that. They don't seem to be able to be mentorable, able to take feedback really well. Or they end up doing crazy things like, I'm going to hire an outsourced salesperson that's going to do all of my sales. I mean, that's like a flashing red light for me of, I need to have someone else to do sales, means I don't understand how important it is. And so it's like, okay, I'm out.
So, there's some of the things you mentioned you must have talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, Lesa. There's one of these things, and I turned 45 here in 60 days, and I mean, as I've gotten older, you mentioned a lot of things, like the feedback thing. Like, if I'm getting feedback from someone that I respect, that has a lot of experience and whatever, like, people, look, it's feedback. It doesn't mean you have to drop everything you're doing and take it. Like, listen and give it, give it some thought. Now, if you get enough feedback, you'll start to hear an echo. Yep. And it'll be the same thing over and over and over and over. So if you have an echo in your feedback loop, there's some validity to it. There's something that's pointing that out. By the way, I fully agree with you on that part. There's nothing worse. So I mentor a few people in an ongoing way. I have for years. And with that, it's pretty simple. I have rules. 1, don't waste my time. And 2, I'm not going to argue with you about whether I'm right or not. Like, you're asking for feedback. I'm giving you my position. I don't have 30 minutes to sit there and listen to your justification for why you're right and I'm wrong. This is a feedback kind of thing, and now that said, it's, you're going to get mentorship or you want input or advice, value it. Value it, take it and just hear what it is. And, like I said, you just kind of measure it up and see what occurs. So, another thing, so the next question I have for you is we've really reduced the whole investment process down to jockeys and horses. It's kind of the best way now, meaning the value of the founders. There's some people that just figure out how to make money. And it might be, that they understand how, when, where, if they need to pivot. And you also have an idea, you've seen some track record with them. And then you have the idea, the business, or what they're behind, which was this theoretical horse we talk about. Some investors like to bet on either. Now, if you have both, they line up at the betting window. Which one of those, if you have to pick the jockey or the horse, but you can't get both, which one do you put more importance on?
I will tell you, this is my answer, but it's also the answer for every leadership person at Techstars. The answer is always the jockey.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us why though. Well, what are the components with that? Because, by the way, I agree with you.
Cody Sims, who's in our investment team, he made the greatest comment. He did screening committee with me in 2018, and we were looking at companies, and one of the founders left the room, and Cody turned to the rest of us, who were all Kansas City people. He turned to the rest of us and he said, "I hate that company, but you're stupid if you don't invest in him," because he's amazing. And I mean, Cody's comment is so perfect, because I can say I can help fix a company. I can't fix a person. And so that's why team. And that's why we got to figure out, are they mentorable? Are they willing to make decisions in a little bit different way than maybe they did before? But if they are amazing, which that was Naman at WattBuy, he would be embarrassed for me to tell that story out loud, but it's the truth. And
you just did.
I know, and he's amazing. And he ended up pivoting his company. So and so we were right, and it's doing great. So
one of the things that I once again, kind of aging myself, I've learned to really appreciate the from the jockey angle, the overall experience, just of a person in general. Now, that isn't always possible in early stages, but I feel personally like I get a sense, like I can, this person gets it, or they figure it out. I think one of the things that's really important for me is how is this person going to handle failure? Yeah. One of the red flags that I get in life, whether it's an applicant or anything else, is when people come in and then you're like, well, tell me about something you failed at. And they're like, well, I've never failed at anything. Yeah. Now that's probably not true, but in the event that it was true and they hadn't, that person begins to work on a forward mentality of feeling bulletproof. And the thing is you just feel like it's never, like things aren't ever going to implode on you. And those are the folks that you usually see making some really wild and reckless decisions, because they haven't ever had to really pull themselves off the mat. I love entrepreneurs with scars. Yeah. No, like, show me your scars, show me your scars. And if you are still around and kicking, because I think Hollywood leads us to believe that people have a good idea and a year later they're a billionaire. That is not the case. I mean, most of these companies that you see exiting and doing stuff are 7 to 10 years old. Some of them are multiple years old before they get funded. And that means that they have gone through that obstacle course. They have taken feedback. They have been beat up. They've had someone tell them the name of their company sucks. That the decisions you've made have been mostly wrong. How are you even in business? Like, if you can get through that gauntlet without just like flipping the desk up and telling everyone to F off on the way out, then you might be able to listen. And the main thing is, you talk about that coachability part is like, and that's the interesting dynamic Matt Watson and I have is there's a lot of stuff we don't agree on, but we're really open to like talk about it. Cause he even said to me earlier today, it's like, I don't think you're right. And I was like, no, actually, this is why this is part of my plan. And he goes, oh,
okay,
you are right. Yeah. And that's that, don't take it personally, like let it roll off and you move forward and you do the next thing. And that's the way that it goes. So, okay. So as far as, and once again, our time flew by here. Did you have another point there?
Well, I just wanted to bring something up because I mentioned to you when I screwed up our time last week that I've got this side project that I've been working on for the last 3 weeks. And this is the perfect example of people who could be dying but aren't. So I volunteered as the healthcare person that actually, works within Techstars. That the moment COVID happened, we knew that we had a bunch of companies that were going to be in the fire or they were going to be in death and maybe needed to redo themselves. And so I've been working with them, about 160 of them, over the last 3 weeks. So that's CEOs that are doing things from Aunt Bertha, which is the most amazing company ever. I won't even go into it, but you should look it up, to Well Health or Agenta. These are companies that already had a telehealth platform working in hospitals that suddenly became like the most important people on the face of the earth, because their technology keeps you out of the hospital and does screening, to companies like, funny, we have two aunts, Aunt Flo out of Cincinnati, who's a Forbes 30 under 30, that completely closed down her business 3 weeks ago to start making face masks. And we have a number of sports companies who completely don't have a business anymore. And so instead they're using their route management software to do the food banks in New York and do routing and trafficking. I mean, those are the kinds of people, and no one told any of them to do this. I mean, all of these companies who have had to do 100% pivots raised their hands and said, here's what we're going to do. And we have gathered around them, and they're all over the world. We have gathered around them and figured out who to make introductions to them to in different parts of the world, like the guys at Reapley in Chicago, who already were working with the governor of Illinois to use their asset management tool to track PPE and ventilators, which is not even part of their business. So then we introduced him to the governor of Colorado and introduced him to the governor of others so that they could do this stuff. I mean, these are founders that will be successful.
In $1 Million Bedroom, one of the very first chapters is titled "My Accidental Business." People say, "Oh, is that luck?" No, it's preparation and opportunity. It's also having a keen sense. I mentioned earlier, like the understanding a path to revenue. Like, hey, I've got all these pieces, and I can either put them together quickly, or maybe we can do something that points us in a different direction or does a couple of different things. So now, once again, with us today, Lesa Mitchell, a Kansas City icon. There you go. No, you really are. You have done so many things for Kansas City, and you recently visited my second hometown and my wife's hometown, Indianapolis, which is a really cool place. I was there for 8 years. That's actually technically where Full Scale started, because Full Scale has traveled down the road, and from a pivoting and survivability and agility standpoint, it's a really funny story that I'm not going to write a book on that yet. I wrote this other book too early. I have to make hopefully we'll have the $1 billion bedroom later. Yeah. And at given rate from where I'm operating out of an extra bedroom in my home, I'm right back in the $1 million bedroom. So it feels very, very at home for me. We end our episodes of Startup Hustle with what we call the Founders Freestyle, where we let our founders or guests talk about a lot of stuff. Now, I still want to do that, but I want to give you an opportunity well, I'm going to ask you to advise founders, but before that, what are some notable things coming up with Techstars that our listeners, which by the way are in 190 countries, can reach out? Like, we'll go to techstars.com, but what are a few notable things that people might want to wrap their arms around?
Well, we have an entire Techstars COVID webpage now that has AMAs that we're doing with ourselves, with Jerry Colonna, with people all over the country that are trying to help founders that are, stuck or broken or solving whatever. So I would tell you to go to our COVID-19 site, where we're pushing out absolutely anybody we had an SBIR workshop the other day. So access to resources we think is unbelievably important. As it relates to Kansas City, I'm all in. I was hoping that I was going to be living in the UMKC building during program. That might not be happening. We may be virtual, but we've run Techstars Anywhere virtually for 3 years, and the companies are amazing that have gone through it. So we are ready to launch program on June 1. We'll make announcements that day of who our next Kansas City Techstars cohort is. So hope everybody pays attention and supports them, and that I hopefully get to have all of them in Kansas City during at least the month of July and August.
Now, there's Techstars programs all over, though. Kansas City isn't where it stops. And even, one of the companies that Full Scale invested in, Healthy Hip Hop, was in the middle of Techstars Atlanta, amidst getting sent home, and is still working through that. But, are there, how many cities does Techstars operate accelerators in?
I can't say cities. I can tell you we have 50 programs. There are some cities where we have 2 or 3, like Berlin, London, LA. Seattle has Alexa and regular Techstars. But we have 50 around the world. I mean, we're in Singapore, we're in Taiwan, we're in Tel Aviv, we're in a number of different places across Europe, as well as places across the US. In the middle of the country, it's Minnesota, Chicago, Kansas City, and Austin.
So I'm willing to bet that if you go to techstars.com, you can find a very complete list of not only places they're operating, but upcoming opportunities and things that you can participate in. So we're going to make a slight pivot, and what we normally do as the Founders Freestyle, we are going to pivot that a little bit into we'll each give a minute or less of advice or whatever in that ballpark. What is the best advice that you could quickly give any founder that wants to try to enter an accelerator or raise capital?
Talk to other founders that have been through that accelerator. It's that simple. It's not hard at all. I often have people talk to founders that have been through with me when I'm trying to sell them on the accelerator. But I think, if you're a founder and you're thinking about going through an accelerator, talk very specifically to companies that have been through that one. You'll learn about the MD. You'll learn if there's corporate partners, about working with the corporate partners. That's my number one advice.
Once again, with us today, we had Lesa Mitchell, the managing director of Techstars. For my Founders Freestyle, I'm going to keep it pretty simple. If you're going to apply for a business accelerator, come proper, have your stuff together, take it seriously. The people that are there to potentially help you get what you want and to review your material, their time's valuable. And I can say that if you don't take it seriously, it's going to show. And the likelihood that you are going to be picked for that accelerator is very little and minimal if you aren't prepared. So with that preparation, get your pitch deck together, practice it, review your business plan, make sure that you define what it is you're asking for and what you plan on doing with the resources or guidance that you get from a program like Techstars. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Startup Hustle, brought to you by Fullscale.io. See you next time.